On this episode, we will be previewing the Monday Night Football games, the Eagles versus the Buccaneers and Rams versus Bengals, because I'm recording this early on Monday. And then we're also going to be recapping not every game, but a lot of the main games from the Sunday slate this past week in Week 3. So let's not wait around too long. We're going to start with the previewing of the Eagles versus Buccaneers game. This is the first of the two Monday Night Football games. This little thing where they're doing two Monday Night Football games, I don't know if I like it too much because I can't really watch both of them at the same time. You kind of can. Depends on what you have as a setup. I usually throw one on the computer and one on the TV, but either way, I don't really like it because I can't pay attention all the way for all of them. So that's the problem. But to start off, Eagles versus Buccaneers. The line in this game is actually at 5. The Eagles are favored in this one. And, man, I think the Buccaneers are probably going to end up covering in this one. I do have the Eagles winning this game. I just think this is the game where the Eagles' passing attack finally gets back to where it was kind of last year. I think you're going to see a big day from A.J. Brown. I think you're going to have a consistent day like you always kind of do with Devontae Smith. May or may not get the touchdown that he's been getting the first few weeks of the season. And I think Dallas Goedert's going to get back into this offense. I think they're going to find a way to get him the ball as well because he's been kind of invisible, and it's not really his fault, I don't think, in the first 2 weeks of the season. I think it's just Brian Johnson, new offensive coordinator, like I've said before, just getting his bearings when it comes to play calling, when it comes to the passing game specifically, because he was able to adapt last week to a game plan that the Vikings defense had for the Eagles, where it was basically they're going to drop 8 a whole lot and just make Jalen Hurts make decisions in the passing game. And once that happened and that pattern started to form, Brian Johnson just went straight to the inside zone run game and was just pounding that over and over until they kind of stopped it, and they really never did. And DeAndre Swift, everybody knows, had the 175 yards and a touchdown there, and the Eagles got away with a win. But in this one, it's going to be a lot tougher to do that against the Buccaneers defense, whose run game is very good. You have Vita Vea, who is one of the best run-stopping defensive tackles in all of football. You have Akeem Hicks down there. You have Shaquille Barrett as a good player. And then you have very athletic and fast linebackers in Levante David and Devin White. Those guys can really fly around. And then you even have a guy like Antoine Winfield Jr. who can come down in the box and tackle well just like a linebacker can. So it's going to be a lot harder for the Eagles to kind of transition into a run game if the pass game isn't working. And Jalen Hurts in the past has struggled with a Todd Bowles-led defensive group in general. In 2021, when the Eagles went to Tampa Bay for the first game of the playoffs there, Tampa Bay just absolutely smoked the Eagles in that one. Todd Bowles' defense was giving Jalen Hurts all kinds of fits. He threw, I think, multiple interceptions in that game, if I remember correctly. And so this is kind of a get-back game or a get-right game for Jalen Hurts. I think he wants to prove that he has improved as a quarterback, as a passer, as a processor of looking at the field. And I think he wants to be able to pass against this team. But I think he's going to do whatever the defense is giving them. I don't think he's going to force anything. He is a very smart quarterback. He's a guy that doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot. He usually makes the right decision. And so I think he'll make the right decisions tonight against Tampa Bay, and I think they will ultimately win the game. But Tampa Bay is no slouch, obviously. Baker Mayfield is having kind of a little bit of a resurgence here in Tampa Bay, and they have looked good. And obviously, they're 2-0, trying to get to 3-0 just like the Eagles are. And this is going to be, a fight to see who stays undefeated, obviously. Moving on to the next game, we have the Rams versus the Bengals. This is at Cincinnati. So the Bengals are 0-2 going into this game. Nobody thought the Bengals would be here at this point. It's kind of just the amalgamation of the fact that Joe Burrow has the calf injury. It's been lingering throughout training camp and now into the season. And there's a lot of speculation that he may or may not sit tonight. I think he'll probably end up playing if I had to put my money on it. But they really have to get a win under their belt. And the Rams are no slouch whatsoever. They obviously came out hot against the Seahawks in Week 1 and won that game. Fought really hard against the 49ers in Week 2. The 49ers are just a really good team. And with a receiving core that's a little bit banged up in Los Angeles for the Rams there, and a defense that's just young and just inexperienced, the 49ers are just a little bit too much for them. But Matt Stafford has been playing out of his mind. In this one, the line is Bengals -2. So the line's at 2. Bengals are favorite at home. And I hate to do this, but I think I like the Rams in this matchup. I'll take the Rams in the points here. And it's just my confidence in Matt Stafford for him to get the ball to his playmakers out there. Lou Anarumo is a great defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think he'll have a nice little plan for the Rams. But I don't know if the Bengals offense can really just take advantage of what the Rams defense is going to give them. The Rams defense has been very scrappy and good. Raheem Morris has done a great job as a defensive coordinator there in LA. And, more power to him. There's a lot of undrafted free agents on that defense, and he's making things work right now. And so this is going to be a very interesting game. I'm very curious to see what happens in this one. Just like I was saying earlier, I hate the fact that I can't really watch both of them as up close as I'd want to. Obviously, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to the Eagles, considering I'm an Eagles fan. But I'm really going to be trying to lock into the second half of that Bengals and Rams game as well. All right, let's go on to the Week 3 recaps. We're going to start with the Colts and the Ravens. This was a closer game than a lot of people were expecting, obviously. The line was pretty, I think it was at like 6 or something like that. It was a pretty big line for the Ravens, and the Colts end up winning the game in a close one. It goes to OT. There's a controversy like when it comes to a call, a potential flag that was not called by the referees, where it looks like Zay Flowers is coming over the middle and gets kind of held. And if the Ravens get that call in that spot, the Ravens can run the clock out essentially and win that game. So a little bit of a fluky win by the Colts, but Gardner Minshew did just enough to get the Colts to win there. And obviously that's huge for the Colts in the AFC South standings, considering the fact that, and we'll get to it a little bit later, the Jaguars dropped one to the Texans. And so the Colts can really stay in contention in the AFC South. It's a huge win to get a win against another AFC opponent like the Ravens. And obviously, once Anthony Richardson gets back, which I think he's played extremely well the first 2 weeks of the season. Obviously, didn't play this past week because of the concussion. But I think they can really start making some noise if they continue on this path to just, basically just taking what the defenses give them on offense. And they don't have like crazy great weapons by any stretch. But they're using their weapons that they do have, and obviously creating weapons out of the players that they have, just like Anthony Richardson and his legs. So that was a huge game, obviously. And the Ravens lose when they drop one. I don't see it as like a complete like panic mode. Like nobody should really move the needle on the Ravens at this point. I think they're still just trying to figure out that offense and how Lamar Jackson kind of operates within a more passing heavy scheme rather than a run heavy scheme like it was all the years prior essentially in Baltimore there. So I don't think you move the needle too much. The Ravens, Colts get a big win. It just kind of is what it is. Next game, Lions versus Falcons. This was another close one, sort of. It was close for a while, and then the Lions seemed to kind of start dominating quite a bit. It looked like once the game got to where the Falcons and Desmond Ridder had to throw the football, it was kind of downhill from there. Desmond Ridder just proving that he's just not the guy moving forward. I think he's just a stopgap. I think he's okay. I don't think he's anything special by any stretch. When it comes to like making plays and throwing the ball down the field, he has not proven to be very consistent, and so that's hurt obviously the Falcons offense in that regard. If the Falcons are in a spot where they can run the ball and they have a lead and stuff of that nature. Basically, when everything's going well, the Falcons are a good team because Desmond Ridder has to make very little plays. They hand the ball off to their special players like Bijan Robinson. They get it out to playmakers like Drake London and Kyle Pitts whenever they can. But mostly that whole offense runs through the run game and Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. So basically, when the Falcons aren't in the lead and their defense can kind of go after the quarterback, it's a whole different ballgame for the Falcons. The Detroit Lions are back on track, it looks like, and I think they are a very good team moving forward, obviously. And so I look forward to seeing how this progresses as the season goes on. But the Lions look good, and they are definitely going to compete in that North Division in the NFC. Next game, we have Packers versus Saints, another NFC North Division team here, and the Packers and the Saints. The Packers came back from 17-0, man. The Packers looked dead to rights. The Saints were moving the ball a little bit. They had one kind of fluke. It's not necessarily a fluke because special teams is one of the three phases of football. But when you get a punt return in this day and age in the NFL, it's kind of fluky. So I'm going to call it that. Obviously the Saints, they were moving the ball pretty decent on offense, but it didn't look great. The Packers defense was doing a good job. They were getting some pressure on Derek Carr throughout the day. Rashawn Gary had a great day on defense for the Packers. And then Derek Carr goes down when they were up 17-0. And from that point on, pretty much the offense kind of stalled for the Saints. And the Packers just kept chipping away at the lead. And they eventually came back. And Jordan Love made some plays at the end there. And they got the win in Lambeau. I think it was their home opener. So I know they're excited about that, obviously. And it's huge for the confidence of Jordan Love to get something like this under his belt where he comes back. And they had some adversity at the very beginning of the game, and he was able to make some plays to get them back in the game and win the game in totality. So that was pretty awesome by the Packers. They're on their way once again. Another team that I think it's going to be at this point. Obviously, Packers and Lions for the division in the North. Bears look terrible. We'll get to that later. And the Vikings, man, they just keep finding ways to lose. They're 0-3, so it's a disaster over there as well, and we'll kind of get to that as well. Next game, we have Texans versus Jaguars. As I kind of alluded to earlier, the Colts in that AFC South division want to try to compete, and the Jaguars are obviously the favorites going into this season, and the Texans were not favored by anybody at all. I mean, the Texans have pretty much been scheduled to lose, 80% of their games or more this season, and so the fact that the Texans were able to come out and just punch the Jaguars in the mouth was very impressive. CJ Stroud has looked great. I mean, they had CJ Stroud essentially fall into their lap, and I think they're going to be thanking, the Chicago Bears, the Chicago Bears for that for a while, just letting the Panthers come up and move up and take Bryce Young from them, because Bryce Young does not look as good as CJ Stroud does right now. That's just the reality of the situation. CJ Stroud is doing this with crazy injuries on the offensive line, very little weapons, just like Bryce Young has in Carolina, and a defense who's missing a lot of pieces. But DeMeco Ryans, the head coach there, is doing a great job with that defense, even with the lack of weapons they have on that side of the ball. The Texans look good. Like I said, they punched the Jaguars in the mouth. Jaguars' offense has not looked good this season, pretty much at all. Week 1, it looked pretty good against the Colts. But I think that was just kind of like week 1 kind of jitters from the Colts in general. They had Calvin Ridley going in that game, the Jaguars, I should say. And it hadn't looked good since then. There's been a report out there that Doug Peterson has given play calling over to Press Taylor. And I think that is a bad decision in general. Press Taylor was a former guy on the Eagles staff when Doug Peterson was with the Eagles. And the years that Doug Peterson promoted Press Taylor and allowed him to do any kind of play calling of any type, the Eagles offense was terrible. And so I think they're back on that same path of giving Press Taylor too much responsibility. And I don't think it's going to be a good thing long term. And I hope for the Jaguars' sake and Jaguars fans' sake that Doug Peterson takes back over play calling, because when he called plays last year for the Jaguars, they were good. I mean, so I don't think they need to stray away from that. I think they need to get back to what they were doing with Doug Peterson as the play caller, and the Jaguars will probably level back out and be fine. But if Press Taylor keeps going on in this trajectory, he destroyed Carson Wentz. He was a young and talented guy, and when he became the play caller, it went straight downhill. And now I hope it doesn't happen the same way to Trevor Lawrence, who is obviously another great young talent in the NFL. So next game, Broncos versus Dolphins. Wow, I never thought in a million years I would see an NFL football team score 70 points in a game. That was incredibly impressive. The efficiency in which they were operating on offense, the Dolphins, Tua getting the ball out of his hands quickly to his playmakers. Between Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, apparently is the way he wants people to pronounce it now. Everybody has been saying Devon Achane for a while now, but he came out after the fact that he had an incredible game this past Sunday, and he said that it's actually pronounced Achane, Chan, the way it's spelled there. So that's an interesting thing we're going to have to get used to. But yeah, Devon Achane went crazy. I mean, he had so many touchdowns. I think there was 8 touchdowns between him and Raheem Mostert. So if you just happen to start Devon there in fantasy, you are a happy camper. If you started Reed Mostert, you were also happy. Basically, if you started anybody on the Dolphins offense, you are very happy. I happen to have the handcuff of Tua and Tyreek Hill, and that was very nice to see on Sunday, just them going crazy. Obviously, Tyreek Hill got his as well. Man, that offense was just operating at a level that I've never seen through the run game, through the passing game. I mean, they had like 700 total yards of offense, which is just insane. The Broncos couldn't get anything stopped. I mean, I think the Dolphins averaged 10 yards per play on offense, which is unheard of, essentially. So Dolphins look incredible. Broncos look like an absolute disaster. Sean Payton, after the game, being very, very short with the media. Because obviously he's had a lot to say this offseason about the likes of Nathaniel Hackett and how this team was the worst coach team he's ever seen in the past. And then he just got blown out by 50 points in one game, which is just insane. And so, I mean, that's pretty much all you got to say about that game. I mean, the Dolphins are on a crash course to, looks like, I mean, obviously the AFC playoffs, but much beyond that. I think if they keep playing in this fashion, dude, there is nothing that's going to stop them really going to the Super Bowl at this point. Let's go to the next game. Chargers versus Vikings. This game, man, I put on, my parlay of the week or whatever, and I said that this was going to score like astronomical amounts in numbers. I thought it was going to go over the 54.5 line. It did not. I should have known that like there was going to be just some absolute pandemonium at the end of this game. There were just turnovers where you weren't going to expect it from Kirk Cousins, and fumbling and an interception thrown by whoever. I mean, this game was insane. It was wild. Keenan Allen has an incredible day. He has, I think, 15 receptions for 215 yards and a passing TD. He didn't have a receiving TD. And this one, he threw a pass to Mike Williams, who scored a touchdown, who unfortunately tore his ACL in this game as well. So he's out for the season. That hamstrings, no pun intended, my fantasy squad, unfortunately. But, we got to pivot. It is what it is. The injury luck bad injury luck happens in every season for these teams, and obviously, and for fantasy managers. Not saying that I'm more important than the health of the player, obviously. It sucks that like we have this many injuries, obviously, this early on in an NFL season. I mean, if you look at the list right now of people that are basically out for multiple weeks, if not the entire season, it is very long at this point. A lot of good players, a lot of stars have already, been missing for the season. We just got done, watching, obviously, Nick Chubb go down for the season, which was very painful to see. He's such a good guy, such a good player, just like Mike Williams. And so you never want to see that type of thing happen. But let me get back to the game here. Vikings versus the Chargers. This was in Minnesota, and the Chargers end up winning in a close one. Looks like, you have a chance there by Kirk Cousins at the end to throw a touchdown to win the game, essentially, and he throws an interception. He tries to force the ball into TJ Hawkinson. It gets tipped up twice and intercepted by Kenneth Murray, and that's just ball game for the Vikings. And the Chargers do not fall to 0-3. The Vikings do fall to 0-3, and their season looks like it's going to be on the rocks. There's a potential there could be like a fire sale, you'd think, at the trade deadline if they don't start turning this around soon. So that's something to monitor with these teams that are 0-3. Basically, any team that you think may pretty much sucks, just look for them. If one of your teams or your favorite team is competing right now and in contention for their division title, these teams are going to want to scalp some of these other bad teams for their good players for some draft capital going into next year. Next game, Bills versus Commanders. This one, Commanders have looked pretty good the first few weeks of the season here. They were 2-0 going into this game. The Bills had dropped, obviously, the first game to the Jets there in crazy fashion, and then kind of rebounded pretty well against the Raiders there, where they just kind of mollywopped the Raiders. And the Bills got back on their dominant path and just smoked the Commanders. They forced Sam Howell into 4 interceptions. I think he took 9 sacks total, which is just atrocious. That should really never happen in an NFL football game. It's crazy that that's the Washington Commanders. I think last year the Eagles sacked Carson Wentz 9 times in a game. And so that's just 2 years in a row where the Commanders quarterback was either holding the ball too long or, just the pass rushers just getting through. So the Commanders, obviously have some things they need to work on now. Sam Howell, you hope he doesn't fall into some bad habits, some bad tendencies based off one game. But for young quarterbacks, stuff like this, games like this tend to snowball for them. We'll see if he can kind of get his head on straight and not let this affect him too much moving forward. But the Bills, they are back to being dominant again, and I hope they can stay this way. I think this is just one of those things where Josh Allen, as long as he can just rein it in and not go too crazy, they're going to be very good on offense. I know they don't have the weapons that you would expect, one of these dominant teams to have. But when he's spreading the ball around and getting to all his playmakers, they are an effective offense. And the defense definitely stepped up today. I think they had a much better day. And as long as they play this well and this way throughout the season, they are going to be contenders in the AFC, obviously. So we'll go to the next game here. Cowboys versus Cardinals. Obviously the biggest shocker of the day, other than the fact that the Dolphins scored 70 points in a game, was the fact that the Cowboys dropped one to the Cardinals in Arizona. Nobody was expecting this. Line was at like 12.5 or something like that for the Cowboys. And the Cardinals came out immediately and just had more energy, it seemed like. It seemed like they were like, their backs were against the wall. They knew nobody gave them a chance in this game. Nobody picked them to win this game. And they took that personally. They played with a chip on their shoulder, and Josh Dobbs came out and was slinging the football. He was running the football well as well. James Conner was able to do what he wanted on the ground, essentially. I think they ran for over like 250 rush yards in the game. So, a weakness that the Cowboys had last year in stopping the run game, reared its ugly head once again this season. A lot of people thought that the Dallas Cowboys kind of fixed that problem because of the first two performances of the year against two really not good offenses. Now that we kind of see where these teams lie, obviously Zach Wilson led Jets, nothing to, be impressed by. And then obviously a Daniel Jones led offense, nothing to be impressed by as well in that regard. So, but basically the Cardinals just ran the ball at them, and then they ran the ball to set up the pass, and then Josh Dobbs was able to hit players when they were open. And that was just the reality of the situation. They had a few, the Cowboys had a few, coverage busts in the back end, in the secondary, and the Cardinals were able to take advantage of it. They ran at Micah Parsons, which was a thing the Eagles kind of introduced to the league last year. In the first game against the Cowboys last year, when the Eagles with the Jalen Hurts and the RPO, they essentially put him in that RPO situation where he has to make a decision between going with the running back, going Jalen Hurts, and then Jalen Hurts. There was usually a receiver on the back end of that was kind of like leaking out as well. So he had 3 decisions to make at one time, and most times the Eagles made him make the wrong one. And I think that's something that you have to do with Micah Parsons because he's so dominant. You have to make him basically the decision maker in those plays. And then once you get past him, the defense is just okay. It's not like incredibly dominant. But yeah, I think the Cardinals did a great job here. Obviously, the Cowboys almost came back in this game, and they were eking their way back. They kept getting to the red zone, but kept stalling out. They had a turnover on downs at one point. They had a couple field goals. And then at the end there, it looked like maybe the Cowboys were going to be able to kind of eke back into this game and, score a touchdown at the end. And Dak Prescott throws an interception in triple coverage. And so that pretty much ended the Cowboys' day in Arizona. And everybody was very shocked, obviously, at the result of this one. But it just shows that after 2 weeks, nobody really knows anything about any of these teams. It takes a little while to pretty much decide what a team is going to be for the season. And so obviously we have these Monday Night Football games. We'll see how these go. But basically after week 3, I still don't know if you make any definitive, statements about these teams. I think it's probably after week 4 when you start saying, okay, this is what this team is. This is what this team isn't. But let's go to the last game. We have Chiefs versus Bears. Really, this game I shouldn't even be talking about. The Chiefs completely demolished the Bears. The Bears look terrible. Justin Fields looks terrible. He was complaining about his offensive coordinator this past weekend or this past week, I should say, in the middle of the week, talking about how he felt like he was robotic because the way they told him to start trying to play. And then he looked just as bad when he was playing, like basically free-flowing as he would, just playing football the way he knows how to play football. It looked just as bad. Chiefs absolutely destroyed them. Really, the only thing of note in this game was the fact that Taylor Swift was there at the game watching Travis Kelce. She was in the suite with Donna Kelce. So that was a huge story, obviously, all over the weekend. I made a little video about it, and people, dude, it's such low-hanging fruit. I really shouldn't even be making these videos about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and the progression of their relationship or non-relationship, whatever it may be at this point. I don't know if they're dating, I don't know if they're not, but I made a video about it and people are eating it up, and so I will continue to do that because it's low-hanging fruit and I need views. I'll be honest. So, yeah, that's pretty much, I mean, the Chiefs look good. Basically, Pat Mahomes just efficient as always. He made one ridiculous throw in this game where he moved up in the pocket, guy ended up right in his face, and he just chucked it and launched it. And he dropped it in an absolute bucket near the sidelines. It's all over Twitter. You'll see it if you just kind of look up the Chiefs highlights from yesterday, I should say. But yeah, he got it done. Got a touchdown pass to Travis Kelce. Taylor Swift went crazy, and so yeah, they just they had a good old time, a giant party in Kansas City yesterday, and Bears fans are just embarrassed to the brim at this point, considering they got embarrassed in front of Taylor Swift and pretty much all of America, especially all the Swifties were tuning into this game just because they saw that Taylor Swift was at the game. They wanted to see her on camera. I mean, it is wild, these Swifties, man. But pretty much that wraps it up for the episode today. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Once again, please follow on my TikTok. Please subscribe to the YouTube. Turn on the notifications so you know when all my YouTube shorts come out and when my podcasts come out. Please follow on Apple, podcast and Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts in general. And once again, I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.